And just to confirm, there's a question in the chat about participants are automatically muted. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So yes, everyone should be muted.
Okay, Nicole, are we
recording? Yes.
Perfect. Okay, can you stop sharing your screen? Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right. Well, we are right at 1 o'clock, so we're going to get started with today's webinar. So I'd like to welcome all of our participants. Thank you for being here today. Our program today is called iMapInvasives Live Q&A. Have your questions answered about iMapInvasives. This session is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent out afterwards to everyone who pre-registered. So you will be able to watch this at a later time if you'd like to. So we have with us today our lovely panel. And these individuals that you see here on the screen are administrators of iMapInvasives, different jurisdictions, either different states, and we have at least one province that's part of the IMAP network. And we also have with us some folks from NatureServe as well. And as a group, we're going to be taking some time today to answer a variety of questions that were received by individuals who are here with us today who have an interest in learning more about iMapInvasives and also some topics about invasive species. And so for your reference, as the different panelists are responding to these questions, you'll probably see that based on our answers, we're all using iMapInvasives in slightly different ways, but all, we're using it all and finding it to be a very beneficial and useful platform. Also, just to note another thing, just as far as housekeeping, at the end of our webinar, we'll have a 15-minute time slot where our panelists will be answering a handful of questions, around 5 or so, that were not necessarily submitted ahead of time, but were our questions that you as participants might come up with during the webinar. You can enter into the Q&A at any time, and we will pick a handful of those and answer those also at the very end. So again, feel free to use that Q&A to ask questions throughout the webinar. And also the chat feature will also be available for use, but we encourage you to use that Q&A as much as possible. So before we begin, I'm going to give everyone here a chance to introduce themselves. And so we'll start with you, Beryl, if you'd like to introduce yourself and say where you're located as far as the city and state or province where you are, and just talk a little bit about your role with iMapInvasives. So Beryl, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Beryl Wade. I'm at the Saskatchewan Conservation Data Center up in Canada. And I'm the invasive species coordinator with the Saskatchewan Conservation Data Center, which is similar to your guys' natural heritage program. And I basically the administrator of the IMAP Invasives platform in Saskatchewan. So that's my major role with IMAP Invasives.
Great, thanks, Beryl. Mary, do you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, there you go. Yeah, hi. I'm with the Pennsylvania Natural Heritage Program, working on the iMapInvasives project.
Okay, Nancy?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nancy Olmstead. I'm an invasive plant biologist. I work for the Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry in the Maine Natural Areas Program. I'm coming to you from my home office in Portland, Maine today, and I help to coordinate iMapInvasives in Maine. I am the administrator for the tool here in Maine. I also, in my position, have other functions. I do a lot of education and outreach. I do survey and mapping and provide management recommendations for addressing invasive plants. We also use the iMapInvasives tool for other taxa besides plants as people are interested. So that's why I am. Thanks, Amy, for hosting today.
Sure, thanks, Nancy. Lori, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes, hi, thanks. My name is Lori Scott. I work with NatureServe, and I'm located in our Arlington, Virginia headquarters office, although like Nancy and many others, I'm also broadcasting from home today and every day this year. My role in iMapInvasives is I'm part of the leadership team with NatureServe, so I provide support fundraising, management, oversight, and whatever Shelley tells me we need to do next.
Thanks, Lori. Jen, go ahead.
Hey, I'm Jennifer Dean. I'm with the New York Natural Heritage Program, and we're based out of Albany, New York. It's at the Capitol. And we work closely with our State Department of Environmental Conservation to help we manage the invasive species data for New York State and for, to help support our partners. So we use iMapInvasives for our data management, for both occurrences and treatment and so forth. And so for my role specifically on our team as the biologist, I help keep the data confirmed and help our partners use the data in strategic ways to help them make decisions.
Thanks, Jen. Michael, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Michael Barber. I'm with the Arizona Heritage Program. We're in the Arizona Game and Fish Department. And I am the administrator for iMapInvasives in Arizona.
Thanks, Michael. Sabra, go ahead.
My name is Sabra Tun. I'm the program supervisor for the Heritage Program in Arizona, and I do the overall general administration and coordination for iMapInvasive and support Michael in whatever he needs to make his job easier.
Sabra, go ahead, Lindsay.
I'm Lindsay Wise. I'm with the Oregon Biodiversity Information Center at Portland State University here in Portland, Oregon. And part of my job here is to run the iMapInvasives program for Oregon. We've been doing for about 10 years. And I also work with our heritage program with rare species data and some other roles here as well.
Thanks, Lindsay. Shelley, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Shelley Cook. I'm with NatureServe. I am a project manager and I'm the primary project manager for iMapInvasives. So I've been here since the inception and look forward to answering your questions today.
And we also have two other individuals who are not panelists per se, but are part of our webinar today. And I'd like them to introduce themselves quickly as well. Mitchell, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Mitchell O'Neill. I'm the end user support specialist for iMapInvasives in New York. So I work with Jen in Albany, primarily conducting trainings and outreach for IMAP users in New York State. And I won't be speaking as one of the panelists today, but you'll see me in the chat box. Thanks.
Thanks, Mitchell. And we also have Nicole from NatureServe. Do you want to take just a quick minute and introduce yourself to Nicole?
Sorry, I couldn't find the unmute thing. Yes, hi, I'm Nicole Uralde. I work at the home office in NatureServe. I'm an executive assistant, but I assist in any way I can. So now I'm happy to help here.
Great, thanks, Nicole. And my name is Amy Jewett. I am based in the Pittsburgh region in Pennsylvania. I'm with also Mary Walsh. We're both with the Pennsylvania Natural Heritage Program. And I am one of the main faces of the IMAP program here in our state. And I do a lot of interactions with our different users, conduct trainings, and I'm the host of today's webinar. So again, welcome everyone. Before we actually jump into our questions, Shelley has a poll that she would like the participants to take. So Shelley, do you just want to talk about that very quickly?
Sure. We have just a couple quick questions, just trying to get an idea if you currently used IMAP, if you're a current user of iMapInvasives, and then what you are representing, like what your affiliation, whether it's federal, state, local government, university, nonprofit, or some other. We're just trying to get an idea of who our audience is today. So Nicole's going to put that up for us, and we'll just take a quick minute before we get started.
We have 50%, 70.
very dramatic watching the numbers go up. I love it.
Yes.
Yeah, I think, Nicole, I think we might be close because I think us panelists can't vote. So I think we might have the majority of the eligible voters.
Perfect. I'm ending the poll. Thank you very much.
Okay, so thanks everyone for taking part in that poll. I think we are ready to get started with our Q&A part of the webinar. So I'll start us off with our first question. This is a question received from a user in Oregon. How are IMAP invasives data being used to help control invasive species?
And so I'll start us off. So here in Oregon, we have cooperative weed management areas, or CWMAs, that bring agencies, counties, and cities together to respond to weeds within our CWMA boundary. And they're one of the main groups of folks that are accessing the IMAP invasives data, contributing to it, and using it in their analyses and prioritization. So several of these groups are using IMAP invasives to collaborate around looking for, reporting, and treating invasive species. One example here in the Portland, Vancouver area is the 4-county CWMA, and they're using IMAP invasives in several ways, focusing on priority weeds primarily, and also early detection species. So we are both consolidating reports from multiple sources into IMAP invasives, asking people to report directly into the program, and then sharing that among the CWMA to prioritize surveys and follow up on management of those known sites. And we do that year to year, and we can add different species that we're looking for on that priority list, and then following up to make sure that we can manage those before they become a big problem in the region. And IMAP Invasives also provides a platform for smaller organizations to fully track their invasive species work online without having to set up their own software or database design. And one example in Oregon is the North Coast Land Conservancy, which is using IMAP Invasives to track their surveys and treatments. And they can track progress on specific species using projects or specific grant work. And for example, they're tracking a policeman's helmet infestation in the Nicanicum watershed and tracking that project year after year.
And another example from Arizona is that our state forestry and fire department administers federal grants for invasive weed control. And they utilize the data from IMAP Invasive in Arizona to help set priorities on the administration of the grants and who receives the grants based on areas of known high concentration, which areas are easier to do habitat restoration and things like that, as well as the same examples that Lindsay used are utilized in Arizona by small nonprofit groups for tracking their projects and using it as their system, as well as the early detection probably being one of the keys to IMAP, is being able to be alerted when something has been detected near your area.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. We'll move on to our next question. This is from a user from Pennsylvania. Given that prevention is the most critical action needed, how does IMAP Invasives help prevent movement of invasive species between regions, states, and countries?
Yeah, so this is a really important question because, of course, prevention is so critical for invasive species management. One thing that's really helpful to know is what is the current distribution of a given species so that a manager can understand whether, in fact, a new infestation really is a new detection or not. And so IMAP Invasives allows us to keep track of the distribution of species that are on the move across the landscape, So in that way, it is a great tool for prevention because you really have to know where it exists currently to know whether or not you have an early detection situation on your hands. Another thing I'd like to say on this question is that many IMAP Invasives programs also have folks who do outreach and education. And so IMAP Invasives data get used to do that outreach and education on species which are not yet detected in the area or that are expected to arrive soon.
Yeah, signing up for the notifications for early detection is probably one of the biggest keys to the prevention and critical action needed. Having that functionality and that ability has allowed folks to jump on early detections and get out in the field and hopefully eradicate before something becomes established. So that's probably one of the greatest strengths of the early notification is knowing where to go out and verify whether it truly is that species and get early control going.
I'll just add one more thought, and that is those who, it looks like we had 50-50 participants who have used IMAP and those who haven't. So those who might have been on IMAP in the past, in the older version, the system were separate, discrete databases by jurisdiction, but the new IMAP Invasives is one unified system for all of North America, and it can allow for advanced reporting tools. We have one called the Approaching Region Report. So that's another advanced capability that allows us to take advantage of data being tracked in multiple jurisdictions and to signal to one jurisdiction if something's advancing towards you. It might not be there yet, but it's sort of on your watch list.
Yeah, in Saskatchewan, the email alert system was one of the attractive features for us when we signed up for iMapInvasives. It was that early detection and potential for rapid response was one of the key features we were looking for.
Okay, great. Thanks, everybody. Our next question is from a user in Oregon. How does the survey information get into the hands of the land manager or landowner?
So because IMAP Invasives is free to users, those land managers and owners are able to create accounts in IMAP and then they can explore the data online. But we also have a lot of partner organizations using IMAP that directly work with land managers and owners to manage species on their properties. In Oregon, that's often soil and water conservation districts. So in that way, the districts can access the IMAP data and then share that directly with the owners that they're working with.
In some of the cases where we have, more state land ownership, like with our New York State parks or our forests and so forth, if somebody else is doing management on there or doing survey work, those results can be transmitted to the state agency worker who's overseeing that via the email alerts. So that state manager or parks manager can set up an email alert based on that specific location. And then anytime somebody inputs data for that particular location, they can receive an email and then go into the database and check on that report.
Okay, great. Thanks, everybody. We'll move on to our next question. This is from a user in Maine. How responsive have state and provincial governments been toward invasive species eradication? Saber, did you want to kick off this particular question?
It's been, well, I'm signed up for this one too.
Go for it.
Sorry. It varies. In Saskatchewan, it largely depends on funding and volunteer, who's doing what and that sort of thing. So the response varies from agency to agency and that sort of thing.
So for responsiveness of state and provincial governments, it does vary greatly. We have had some really good examples in Arizona where local entities, cities, have actually sent out through different either mailings through their water bills or through Nextdoor app and other things, kind of some highlights on look out for this invasive species, contact your HOA, try to get this. One example here is stinknet or globe chamomile that we have a huge issue with, and they actually have some reporting and eradication efforts at local levels, whether it's an HOA or a city or counties that have created some noxious weed lists for their local jurisdictions.
And we also, have some good responsiveness to eradication projects when it truly does seem like it's a low abundance early detection species. We have to be very strategic when we're thinking about whether something is really feasible to be eliminated and whether those, will get a good return on investment in terms of resources put towards that. And so it's a very select case of species, but that's when good data becomes super important, because you want to make sure that you really know how well this species is distributed and if it truly is a early detection species enough to be considered for that type of management.
Okay, great. Thanks, everybody. Our next question is also from another user in Maine. They asked, while mapping of invasive species is important to record their incidence and rate of expansion, what does NatureServe and in conjunction the iMapInvasives network do with the data that actually leads to a limit of the spread and eradication of an invasive species? Lindsay, did you want to kick us off on this question?
Sorry, yeah, I got distracted by chats and emails.
Okay.
So IMAP is one part of a greater community that needs to work together towards eradication and mitigation. In Oregon, IMAP data is used by a variety of partners to prioritize surveys, direct management, and analyze distributions and such. And the IMAP platform focuses on being a place where data can be stored and shared in a standardized way and made accessible to a large number of people, and also providing reporting tools that can help users with quick analysis. We do allow users to download data also, or use web map services. So there are a couple other ways for people to get and use that data. We do have a limit on the number of records that people can download at once so that the system doesn't get bogged down. But for more complex downloads, you're welcome to contact us, the administrators, and we're able to do custom exports. For example, I'll often get requests from university professors or grad students who use our data for predictive mapping and distribution modeling. And some of the agencies also make use of the data in that way. We work closely with our Department of Agriculture to share data so they can be aware of any high priority weed sites. And then also several of the local agencies, such as our soil and water conservation districts, and several of the cities also use IMAP to check for new sites and to prioritize management and survey.
Yeah, and I'll just add in, just by having that whole system in place, kind of like what Lindsay was mentioning, this is just one piece of the puzzle, but having statewide partners who are, themselves reporting data, but also educating citizen scientists and volunteers and the general public on what to look for and how to get that information reported is so extremely valuable in like making that connection between data and actions. And so like I mentioned the email alerts previously, those email alerts are so powerful, and you can sign up by species or by location or both. And they're, that puts that information in the hands of our state agency staff right away. And one example that we had over the summer was we had a camper who was up at Lake George near the Adirondacks and found hemlock woolly adelgid, which that it was the most northern extent of the population so far, and it was actually a big jump from the other known populations. And the Adirondacks is this area that we're really trying to slow the spread of hemlock woolly delgid into the Adirondacks and keep it out as long as possible. So this was a huge early detection finding. Our state agency reps got the email alert that day, and by the next day they were coordinating how to get boats out to this boat-only campsite so that they could follow up on this report submitted by the user, and within the next couple of weeks had a plan in place for big surveys and control methods. And so, just that connection of somebody sees something, they report it, and then that information gets into the right hands of who can act on it. That's where, rubber really hits the road on making that connection with the data.
Yeah, Jen, I think that's a great example to provide, and it sort of ties into how I was going to respond to this question. So in Pennsylvania, we do a quarterly newsletter, and we also have a blog on our state-specific iMapInvasives website. And what we do in our newsletter is highlight stories of people who are going out and doing different projects, whether that's survey and inventory or management of some sort, or even research or something like that. But we take, essentially those stories are coming from data that is being put into iMapInvasives. And so the data doesn't always tell the story. That's where the jurisdictional administrator comes in. We are the ones with that close, and I guess you could describe as an intimate connection sometimes with our users, that we understand what that data means. And so we take that data then and translate that into a story. And so we'll actually have some of our users write those stories, and then we publish them in our newsletter, and then also in our blog, as a way to then let other people know about what's going on, so that they can then be aware and then maybe participate in a particular event. Like, for example, in Bucks County in southeastern Pennsylvania, the Bucks County Conservation District has been doing an event now for, I think, the last 12 years at a particular lake, Lake Towhee, where there's a pretty intense water chestnut infestation. And we have written an article about that in our newsletter in the past. And that's a way to hopefully get more people to know about that event, and then sign up and volunteer and be a part of it. And then hopefully as more people get to know about that event, there's more volunteers that are helping out and trying to make a difference. Okay, we'll move on to our next question. This is from a representative of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They asked, are there any federal land management agencies that are using iMapInvasives as their primary platform for collecting data on the occurrence and management of invasive species? And is this even possible, and are there any issues to consider with that? So I'll actually start off on this particular question. So in Pennsylvania, we have folks that are with the National Park Service, specifically with the Upper Delaware Scenic and Recreational River, that have been utilizing IMAP for several purposes. They're using it to track where they're finding aquatic and terrestrial species. And they're also creating maps to know where people are coming from that are coming to visit this particular park, and then using that information to maybe understand potential species that might be coming in also accidentally by the visitors to the park. And that's then being used to prioritize early detection and rapid response for some of these potential species. They're also trying to share out that information on their social media platforms, and also with others like private business owners, anyone that might be interested in knowing about that information and taking part in helping others to be aware of that. So that's just one example of a federal agency that's utilizing iMapInvasives.
Yeah, in Arizona, we found that a lot of the federal agencies are required by permits and other reporting requirements that they have to maintain their own system, like Forest Service has to maintain their own system to report chemical treatments and other things they're doing. However, they do share their data with IMAP so that we can aggregate the data together in one place for displaying. So although some of the federal agencies can't necessarily utilize it, there are sharing capabilities to make sure that the data can be aggregated.
And just one other thing to note, I just saw that in the last month, the Department of Interior released their next 5-year strategic plan. And in this, one of their objectives is sharing data more widely from federal lands and federal staff. And so one of the action items of metrics that they have in there for measuring this is to encourage that federal data to be shared amongst other more national databases. And so those can include the iMapInvasives, EdMaps, the Bison database, and the USGS Aquatics database. So it's just another great way that the federal government has started thinking about how to better share this information and encourage their staff and their data to get into these more publicly accessible formats and systems.
Yeah, which I think is a great step forward. We're all really excited about that. So. Okay, our next question is from a user in Oregon. They would like to know what data are most useful to submit. In other words, are there particularly glaring holes in either species or geographic coverage?
Yeah, that's a great question and something that we get asked a lot here too. And it definitely depends on your jurisdiction and how much effort has been spent on getting people out and measuring invasive species, whether that's strictly on state lands or whether it's in, more public infrastructure areas or developed areas. One thing I tell people here is that think about the species that are not known to be well established and widespread. So we do have a lot of information on the things that are quite common in New York and probably within the other states as well. But it's those lower abundant species that we're really needing more data on to know, is this a true early detection species, or is it something that people just haven't thought to start reporting yet? And so those early detection species, especially ones that are suspect to be very high impact, those are the ones that we encourage people to look at. And I also, whenever I do a training, I encourage people to go to the map in iMapInvasives and look in the area that they know well, like look around your town or your park that you frequent a lot. And what are we missing? Because this is the presence information comes from observations, so if nobody has gone to that area to survey yet or submitted the data, then we don't have it. So, go out to the areas that you know best on the map and look to see what species we might be missing, and then go out and collect that data and report it. Help fill in those data gaps for us.
And I would just add to that quickly. So when we say about early detection or high priority species, maybe folks don't always know what we mean by that. And so in Pennsylvania, we actually started an event last year called the Invasive Species Scavenger Hunt. And there is a list of 15 species on there, and a handful of them were those early detection, high priority species where maybe they are, pretty rare in our state or not well documented. And the ultimate reason for why we did that event was to get more people out purposely surveying for these specific species that were on the list. And it was actually a really successful event. One of the species on our list was New Zealand Mud Snail, which is a high priority aquatic species in our state that's invasive. And we did actually have several new findings in a new location that we never knew that they were there before come from that event. And so that was a big success for us and another, good reason for why, we will most likely have that event again this year, so.
And I just wanted to go off of what Jen said. If there is a park or something that you frequent often and you go to IMAP and you see there's nothing there, you can always run the approaching region report to see what might be close by but not yet there, and it'll give you a list of the species within a certain buffer distance that you put in that are in that buffer distance but not yet in your area. So it gives you some target species to plan your surveys around.
Thanks, Shelley.
I know up here I've got several species to the list up here from, you can customize the listing And at the request of, I've added species to the list so that people can start to look for it and put in observations.
Thanks, Beryl. So our next question is also from a user in Saskatchewan. They ask, coworkers have raised privacy concerns regarding GPS data and photographs within iMapInvasives. What protections are in place to ensure that this data is not misused?
So up here in Saskatchewan, we're taking the stance that freely available is how we want, you know, the more people that can use it, the more we will get the data and people will be able to use the data. However, with there's in one particular instance, I had a hunter that wanted to sign up for wild boar so he could find a place to hunt them. And our wild boar data is approximate data. I don't have very many specific locations on that for people to access. It's all very generalized data right now. And the other thing is that if you want something to be confidential, you can make it confidential, but you do with the new system, you make it confidential to everybody. So there are, and again, there are the user agreements about sharing data and that sort of thing. So there is an agreement that all users are signing for the use of the data.
Yeah, and I'll just piggyback on that a little bit. So when a user signs up for IMAP, they are required to read and accept the user agreement. For the most part, we do want this information to be publicly accessible. You know, we want to control the spread of invasives, so we do encourage the sharing of information across the boundaries and such. If people are afraid that they're putting in something sensitive or they don't want to give that information out, as Beryl mentioned, you can mark that as confidential. And the jurisdiction administrators also have the ability to mark certain locations as approximate. So they don't, that in that instance, you won't know, it could be approximate to town, county, some point on a map. So there's ways to record that as well. So we do have some of those stopgap measures in place. We also have the confidential users that Beryl mentioned, and those confidential users are required to sign a confidential user agreement before they become a confidential user. And if, for the most part, it's an honor system. But if we do find out that people are misusing IMAP data, we can revoke their IMAP privileges and, no longer allow them to use the system.
Yeah, thanks for all that info, Shelley. That's all. I think that's sometimes not always well known, so I'm glad that we were covering that today. Okay, our next question is also from user in Saskatchewan. The question is, what options are there for entering large amounts of data from other sources? Examples would be coordinates from spray contractors and data collected on other programs such as ArcGIS. If you can briefly comment on some of the different data formats that are acceptable and the different methods of uploading, and if there are any particular constraints to any of these options, that would be great to talk about.
Okay, so IMAP does have a bulk upload capability. Users can send data to the administrator for their state or province, and then that data can be bulk uploaded into IMAP. A lot of the data we get in Arizona is uploaded that way. One of the data sets we get regularly is from one of the counties in Arizona. They have a contractor that does their road right-of-way surveys and treatments, and then they send the data to us that we upload it. The format, it's not really, at least to me, it's not really that important. I get data as Excel files, shape files, geodatabases, as long as it has the information we need. At a minimum, you need the observation information, who, what, when, where, the location and identification. So as long as it has the data that we need to the minimum requirements for creating a record, we can convert it and bulk upload it into IMAP.
One of the other pieces of data that is helpful if you have it or if you can create and store it is a unique record ID. Since IMAP is drawing from a lot of different sources, sometimes we get that data from multiple places. So like, for example, we share with our state Department of Ag. They have their own weed data set that they also get data from a lot of different places. So sometimes I get it from the agency that's collecting it and also from the state. And if there's that unique ID in there, I can see if I've already imported it from one source. And IMAP also does have a way to check for exact duplicates. But as any of you who have worked with data will know, when data moves around, it can change in small ways and be difficult to compare. So if you have that ability of making a universal unique ID or some other unique ID for each of your records, that can help us and then other groups who are also using and merging these types of data together. But it's not a requirement. So we want you to share your data and we don't want to make roadblocks.
Right, well said, Lindsay. Okay, our next question also from a user in Saskatchewan. Could you please expand upon the permissions for different user levels in relation to data protection?
Yeah, in the new system, there's basically 3 levels. The first is the basic user level. You can see confirmed, unconfirmed. The second level has to do with organizations and being able to do treatments. And then the third level is administrative level, either at an organization level where you can control who is part of your organization and QA/QC records, and at a higher level, the administrators of the system in each jurisdiction have godlike powers for administration purposes. So those are the basic 3 levels of organization and permissions that are in the system right now for users.
And I'll just throw on top of that, there's public users as well. So you can access the IMAP without logging in, and those people can only see confidential records. Once you create an account, then you get the ability to see more data. And then you're considered to be a user of IMAP. Then you can request to join a jurisdiction. And if you become a jurisdiction member, then you get even more powers. And then there's also different levels within a jurisdiction. So you can be the jurisdiction admin, which you have those godlike powers. You can be a member, which just gives you the basic abilities. You can still create treatments within your jurisdiction for if you are a member of that jurisdiction. Then we have data managers who can do certain QA/QC things with the various data records. And within each of the jurisdictions, we have organizations and projects as well. And you can have project administrators and organization administrators. And then you can have members of those organizations and projects that again have various levels. You can also designate people to be confirmers. Then they can confirm records. They can't edit anything else, but they can confirm records. And then again, we have those confidential users. So we do have quite a few levels of different roles and permissions that you can assign within your jurisdiction. But there is like the basic member, the user, and then the administrator of the various levels, and then the public.
Great, thanks, Shelley. Another user from Saskatchewan asked, how are submissions to iMapInvasives validated?
Yeah, so that's another really important question. And iMapInvasives does have a process by which submissions are confirmed. So when data are entered into iMapInvasives, unless it's a bulk upload of known partner data, the data go in as unconfirmed. And then within each jurisdiction, there are different confirmers in place for the various different taxa of invasive species. And a reviewer will look at the photo sometimes, or if the person who submitted the record is a known entity with taxonomic expertise in that particular group of organisms, they may be on a list where their observations are automatically confirmed. So it really varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but we all have some process in place by which those observations, those presence records are reviewed and set to confirmed once the species ID has been confirmed. Just to note also that we also leave unconfirmed records, for example, that look like they're on private land where we can't determine whether landowner permission was received. And so those might be records that remain unconfirmed.
In Oregon, a lot of our data is coming from the managing agencies who are out there treating species. So we assume that those are vetted because it's coming from folks who are working with that for their profession. And so those we would bring in as confirmed, and we can also label that as confirmed by partner data. So that's coming from a trusted source. As Nancy mentioned, we can also view images that have been submitted if it's coming from people that we're not familiar with. In Oregon, we also source things from some other systems that have their own vetting systems. So for example, we have the Oregon Invasive Species Hotline in Oregon, and all those reports are looked at by a network of experts across the state. So they'll confirm it in the hotline, and then I can export that and import it into IMAP as confirmed. And if there are things that we can't confirm, it will still be in IMAP, but it will be in that unconfirmed layer. So it's clearly separated from those that have had some eyes on it.
And I'll just add also, similar to what Nancy was saying, so we also in Pennsylvania have a list of experts that we will call upon to help to assist in reviewing records where they have expertise on that particular species. So I have folks that are really good at IDing terrestrial plants. Some folks are good at the aquatic invertebrates. Others are bird people. So it really varies across the board, but we do have a variety of people that we work with. And I would also say that I think this is true across the board. Data management and data confirmation is a process. It does not happen quickly, unfortunately. And so we just would say that, you know, if you enter a record today and it's not confirmed in a month from now or so, like, don't be surprised, because it can take some time. Sometimes it takes a lot longer than that, just based on capacity and the amount of records that might be coming in at one time. Like, for example, when things start greening up and there's a lot of people that are out in the field season contributing data, we can get a lot of records at one time, and it might take some time to go through all of them. And also I would just mention, because I was actually just doing some data QC here recently and a little bit here this morning, sometimes we get people that will submit a record and they don't contribute a photograph. And so that is problematic because we rely on those photos. If we don't know you, if you're not someone that we know as being a species expert, we really need those photos if it's going to be something that's submitted to the platform within your record. And if there isn't a photo, then we'll reach out to you to see, you know, what we can do to maybe work around that. But there's a chance that your record will not be able to be confirmed if it doesn't have that photo. So just please keep that in mind when you're submitting data. Please make sure that you're putting in at least one photograph, and it's a good photograph. It's got those distinguishing characteristics of the species that you're observing. It's nice and close. Sometimes we get pictures that are taken from a distance, and it's very difficult to identify those photos. Okay, our next question is from a user in Pennsylvania. They are curious about the mobile app. Their question is there any way to upload more than one photo using the phone app? It seems you can do up to 5 photos when submitting through the web page.
Yeah, we haven't talked about the mobile app yet, and it is a really great resource if you want to map and record stuff out in the field. And so you can record species presence and absence. And then you can use the mapping feature, within the app to record, the infestation that you're logging. But unfortunately, it only can hold one photo per record. So that's the limitation of the mobile app, the regular IMAP app. And I'll put a link to how to get more information about the app in the chat box. But so that is the limitation of the current app. But that said, once you submit the photo, once you submit the record, you get back to, say, your computer at home, if you've taken more photos, you can go in and find your record that you submitted through the app, and then you can add additional photos.
And I'll just add on to that. There is some thought going in right now into opening that up to more photos, an improvement to the app itself, but we don't have a timeline on that just yet. Hopefully sometime in the next few months that we will be able to, because that is one of the biggest requests from users here in New York for the mobile app itself, is to be able to put more photos in there. There is a new app that NatureServe had released right at the end of the field season. So I don't think a lot of people have had a chance to use it. It's more for advanced data management. So if you're going out to the field and collecting lots of observations and lots of treatment information, that kind of thing, there is a Survey 123 app that is now available through NatureServe. It's really slick. It's a great way to collect a lot of data and polygons, but you can put I think up to 3 photos per observation or per presence record into that app. And there's instructions on our website on how to access that. And it'll be a really powerful tool. Hopefully a lot of people get to use it next summer, or this summer coming up.
Great, thanks, Jen. Thanks, Mary. We have somewhat of a technical question from a user in Maine. This person says, this may be too technical a question for this webinar, but I'd like to know how to enter a set of records, say for a survey of a particular property done on a single day, without having to repeatedly enter the date, name of property, photo credit, etc. for each entry. This drives me crazy.
So I'll just chime in. We've talked about this a little bit, but IMAP does have the bulk upload capability. So if you had a data set that you could get into an Excel spreadsheet or something like that and upload as a CSV, you can fill out all of that information at one time and bulk upload everything at once. And it doesn't matter if you have 10 records or 100 or 1,000, there's really no minimum or maximum that you can do. So.
And there's also a specific data type in iMapInvasives if you're in the online version. So that the 4 data types are presence, treatment, not detected. And then there's one called multi-record searched area. And that last data type, that multi-record searched area, is basically what this person, the problem they were describing, is how you would do that, how you would enter multiple data types or even the same data type, but multiple records all at the same time. And you don't necessarily have to repeat putting in the same information over and over again.
And I know I just mentioned it, but I'll give another shout out to the new app that NatureServe developed. That's really, the ideal way to collect information. Like if you're doing a lot of survey work in one preserve at one day, if you have the ability to get that Survey 123 app on your device, you can collect all that information pretty seamlessly and then get it uploaded directly into iMapInvasives.
Great, thanks, Jen. Our next question is from a representative from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Their question is, does iMapInvasives maintain data on the occurrence of invasive species outside of current jurisdictions?
Yeah, so data can be added from any place now that the new platform is nationwide or North American. So data can actually be entered as long as you have a user account. You can enter data without having to go through a particular jurisdiction. So information can be added or may be available for outside of a particular jurisdiction.
And I'll just add the one thing with those non-administered jurisdictions is that generally there's no confirmers for that. So data can be entered, but they won't necessarily be confirmed, so they wouldn't be available to the public or on our public web map service.
And if you're looking for support in a currently non-administered jurisdiction, please contact NatureServe. We would love to, try and encourage more organizations and participation. So we would definitely welcome new organizations signing on to serve in that role so we can fill in more of the map with confirming administrators.
Thanks, Lori. Our next question is also from that same user from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They would like to know why some jurisdictions, such as Florida and Virginia, have been discontinued and are no longer with iMapInvasives.
Sure, I'll take a stab at that. So we've talked a few times, we've mentioned about the former version of iMapInvasives and the new version. As we moved into the new system, we brought in the confirmed valid data from all previous jurisdictions that have used it, but we don't currently have an active administrator in some of those jurisdictions. And so because of what we've mentioned about the lack of an active administrator to confirm records, there's less functionality now in some of those places. So again, we would welcome other organizations to participate. In some of the states, we still have active members of the NatureServe network in those locations, and we are in ongoing communication with them about potentially being able to bring them online. In some cases, states just lack the staff capacity to have dedicated invasive species resource. So it's just fluctuation in funding and capacity and other limitations that are not always in our control.
Thanks, Lori. Our next question is from a user in Pennsylvania. They'd like to know regarding the jurisdiction species list, does it only affect the list of species available to me? And is it worth it for me to submit observations from outside of my home state?
So yeah, if you're under a particular jurisdiction, then you'll see the list within your jurisdiction, and they do so. Within Pennsylvania, we have a slightly different list than other states or states that are not within the current IMAP jurisdictions. So yeah, it's true, but it is worth it for you to submit records still. And if you have some issues with the jurisdiction list, you can contact, for instance, Amy or I, and we can provide the contact information if you don't have it already. But yeah, we can assist with those kind of issues if we need to get a species added to a region outside of Pennsylvania.
I'll just talk a bit about the difference between the jurisdiction lists and the list that's available in those non-administered states and provinces. So we did want to provide a way for people to report things in unadministered areas, but it is a shorter and more generic list for those states and provinces. The reason being that each jurisdiction, each province and state has their own noxious species lists, their own priorities. Some things are invasive in Oregon, but are native in southern US, like the bullfrog. So it really takes somebody who can curate that list and confirm it. So for the non-administered areas, we made a list that includes just species that are invasive in both the US and Canada across the board. And it tends to be a combination of commonly encountered invasive species and high priority invasive species. So you can still make an impact in those areas by reporting on things, but it won't have that specifically curated list that the administered jurisdictions do.
Okay, thanks, Lindsay. There is one more question I want to get to before we answer some of those Q&A questions here at the very end. And so our final pre-submitted question is this. This is from a user in Oregon. They'd like to know, why should we use iMapInvasives as opposed to other platforms such as EdMaps, and do they relate and interact somehow?
Sure, so I'll start us off on that one. So iMapInvasives was really designed with the managers in mind. Of course, it's also applicable to community scientists and the public, but we specifically designed a lot of additional features for managers. So like really detailed treatment information and survey information, and then all the reporting tools that we've built. So users can now get an area treated report and an infested area report, these approaching region reports to help people look for things that are nearby. So that's really a major difference between iMapInvasives and other programs. In Oregon, we also put a lot of effort, and I know some of the other jurisdictions do this as well. We put a lot of effort into incorporating invasive species data from multiple sources into IMAP to make it the most comprehensive invasive species data set for our state. So those are some of the ways that IMAP differs, and also how we interact with these other systems where we are trying to seek out and bring that data into IMAP as well.
Yeah, in Arizona, iMapInvasive at the time we joined back in 2007, we had the option of either creating our own, going with one of the existing, at that time, EdMaps was plants only. And being that we're a game and fish department, we were more interested in animals. And so iMapInvasive kind of gave us what we needed, plus the ability to do the treatments, track projects, bring cooperators in at no cost. All were leveraged the decision in going with IMAP. In the West, the Western Governors Association is trying to come up with a way to aggregate or display those data sets together. So there is a major effort going on in the Western 17 states to start aggregating data together from bison, from the USGS Aquatic Invasive Species Database, IMAP, and EdMaps. And what we would like to do is be able to display the data on the various platforms without having to manage each other's data sets, and try to reduce the need to have unique identifiers and duplicative records and that kind of thing. And so we're trying to work towards getting a platform where we can pull data sets in from the various partners through APIs and other ways, so that we can start utilizing and leveraging the data from the multiple large data sets together.
One thing that just
also-
springs, sorry, just to spring up what Sarah was talking about with these, being able to share the data across those data sets. One thing that iMapInvasives really stands apart from the others, and we've really benefited from having NatureServe take on the redesign a couple years ago and use their amazing programming knowledge and online mapping and knowledge to make the database open for web map services. And so you can actually take a live stream of the IMAP data and plug it into your own application, which has been really powerful for our managers here in New York State. Because sometimes you just want a subset of that data in your own website or your own ArcGIS online, and you can do that with the way that they've leveraged the newest mapping and Esri technologies into iMapInvasives.
I also wanted to mention the map filters available on the iMapInvasives map. So it's also a very map-centric system, so you can turn on and off a ton of different layers depending on what you're interested in. And then we have a filter tool where you can set various parameters to further limit what you're looking at. So if you're only interested in 1 or 2 species, you can choose those and just look at those. You can limit it to just your own observations or just your own organization's observations. You can set a date range. There's really a ton that you can do, including like habitat type. So you can filter just for aquatics or just for animals. And then you can also further combine that with the reports. So you could get a report for just invasive aquatic animals in your local park. So I think that's some really powerful functionality that's available on IMAP.
And just to piggyback off of that, you can also create custom distribution maps using those filters on the fly. So you can apply any filter you want to any area and click a button that says create custom distribution map, and it'll filter that those records, and then you can have that distribution by any of the geographies that we manage within IMAP. So county, jurisdiction, water body, the management area. So any geography that we manage, you can create a distribution map on the fly.
Okay, great. Thanks everybody for all those great insights. We are going to take some time here at the very end to try to answer live some of the questions that have been coming in through the Q&A. So I'm going to hand the reins over to Nancy if you'd like to ask some of the questions that have been coming in, and we'll take a stab at trying to answer them here at the very end of our webinar.
Yeah, so thanks so much to all of our participants for your great questions that have been coming into the Q&A, and some of us have done our best to reply to those. I know that Mitchell did share in the chat contact information for all of our jurisdiction administrators. So if you want more information on any of those questions that have already been answered, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We have an open question from Corellia that has to do with exporting a report or creating a report, I believe. And if someone could please respond to Corellia's question about getting no results found, and just in general, describe some of the ways that users can use reports within the IMAP interface. Jen, can I call on you to address that?
Sure, and I am looking at Corellia's question. I'm not sure if I'm completely understanding it. Let's see, so if you're running a report, so I'm wondering if this has to do with exporting results possibly, or if you're identifying an area, say, so I'm just going to make a leap and think that it's referring to if you're identifying an area and you get no results found in the pop-up table. So there could be different reasons for that. Either you should check the layers in the table of contents, which runs on the right-hand side of the screen, and make sure that the appropriate layers are turned on that you're looking for. You can do a, you can use the tool to like draw a polygon around the area where you say, if you see results on the map and you draw a polygon around that, and then you can push the button that says see what's here. And that should give you a list. If you see it on the map, you should be able to see it in the table. If you're running an export and you get no results found, there could be different permissions levels. Like you can't export unconfirmed records, which are not your own or your organization's. So there are some permission levels as well that you might be running into. But I'll leave it open if anybody else has a different explanation or interpretation of the question, please jump in.
I would just say, if you think you're having an issue, you can always report it to your jurisdiction admin, and then they will look into it for you. And if there happens to be a bug, which sometimes happens, they'll submit it to us, and then we'll take care of it as soon as possible. So sometimes those things sneak up, but it's most likely a permissions thing or something or like that.
Corellia also had a second question, which was regarding whether users can upload a shapefile into iMapInvasives, and I wanted to address that. At this time, users cannot upload shapefiles into iMapInvasives. There are a lot of concerns with field matching. iMapInvasives is a very deep database, and we're simply not able to accommodate user uploads of shapefiles or other kinds of GIS files. There are multiple different options for how to draw a searched area, including a line that you can buffer or a polygon that you can draw. And so again, using the multi-record searched area and digitizing your searched area in that way. I think that I'll let somebody else speak to this, but I believe there could be capacity in the bulk upload world to accommodate bulk uploads perhaps of searched areas. Can someone speak to that?
I can take a stab at that. For the bulk uploads, currently right now you have to bulk upload via CSV, so it's point only. So you have to have your XY coordinates. It is on the roadmap to expand to polygons to be able to take those geodatabases or shape files. And there are, New York has created a tool which they've shared with the other jurisdiction admins that will upload polygons. So there is a kind of a workaround right now, but it is on the roadmap to add that functionality in the future.
Great, thanks, Shelley. And the other question that I wanted us to just address in a bit more detail is regarding the two different apps for iMapInvasives. So I know that there were some questions about different ways that data can be added. And we have a basic iMapInvasives mobile app, which allows for creation of presence point records or presence not detected records. And that app is designed with everyone from natural resource managers to community scientists in mind. And so we saw several folks with questions about using the tool with community scientists, and I would strongly recommend the classic or basic iMapInvasives mobile app. It's a very simple interface. But there is a second app, which is a Survey 123 interface. And I'd like to call on someone from New York to say a bit more about who that tool was designed for and ways that it can be effectively used. It looks like Jen is nodding and ready to respond.
Yeah, so this is definitely designed with natural resource managers in mind. Like our state park staff would be an ideal use case scenario here in New York, where they're going out every day with a crew of people who can, do a lot of surveys and create a lot of treatment records in one day in one area. And so you do not have to have an Esri account, even though Survey 123 is an Esri product. It might help if you're familiar with that, but you can download the Survey 123 application from like the Google Play or Apple Store. And then you have to actually get a specific link for the customizable form. And so the field form actually matches the data fields that are in iMapInvasives online. So you can take this out into the field. You can actually believe you can load base maps for your specific area. So if you're going into areas without connectivity, which happens a lot here, like in the Adirondacks and the Catskills, you can have your field data collection tool all set, go out into the field, collect that data, and then when you get back, you can upload that into connectivity. But that is definitely geared towards the natural resource managers. And yeah, we hope a lot of people will be using that this summer.
Thanks, Jen. Oh, go ahead, Michael, quickly.
Yeah, one thing I'd like to add on that, for those of you who are not familiar with it, Survey 123 is a form-centric application. It's based on creating a form. And it's actually very powerful in terms of the tools that are available within it for designing your form. So it's got some conditional responses. And in terms of the location information you record, you can either use your device's GPS for either collecting a point or drawing a polygon, or you can draw on the map within the form.
Michael, I think we need to either hand it back over to Amy for wrapping up, or Amy, if there's one more minute. I know that Lindsay wanted to say something quickly about use of iNaturalist. Okay, Amy's given us the thumbs up, Lindsay.
Okay. So we had a few Q&As, and we did mean to talk about this, but we're running out of time. Anyway, several of us do have iMapInvasives related projects on iNaturalist. In Oregon, I often direct people to enter things into iNaturalist who are working primarily with students or the public, because it has some more social features than iMapInvasives. But we do look at that and use it in IMAP also. So iNaturalist uses Creative Commons licensing, and also those projects, we can get permission from people using those projects to download the iNaturalist reports and upload that into iMapInvasives. Several of us are doing that. So it is another option for folks, especially if you're working with students. It's a little more engaging. They can chat back and forth with each other and get help on the ID.
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay. I'm glad we did get to talk just briefly about iNaturalist. There was other questions I know we wanted to get to, and I'm sure there's more in the Q&A, and we just unfortunately are running out of time. So we are going to wrap up today with our webinar, and I just want to say thank you again to all of our great panelists. So thanks, Beryl, Nancy, Lori, Jen, Michael, Sabra, Lindsay, Shelley, Mary, and thanks also to Mitchell and to Nicole. You all did a fantastic job. And also just thanks to all of our participants today who attended. Thank you for taking the time. We hope that you have gained a better understanding of IMAP invasives because of the good conversations that we had here today. Also just want to remind folks that this session was recorded. And so hopefully soon we will be able to send out an email that will have a link to this recording so that you can either watch it again, share it with others. So just so you know, it was recorded. And if anyone does have any additional questions, either questions that you pre-submitted and we didn't get to today, or ones that you have as you go on with your journey with IMAP invasives, please feel free to reach out to any of us. Our contact information is available on imapinvasives.org. And if you'd like to reach out specifically to either Lori or Shelley at NatureServe, you can go directly to natureserve.org, and there is a contact option on their website that you could get in touch with them as well. And oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, actually, as you leave the webinar today, there's going to be a quick survey that pops up that asks you if you'd like more information on IMAP invasives. So you can leave your name and email address, and one of us will get in contact with you. And it also leaves, there's a space, if you didn't get a question answered, you can pop it in there and we'll do our best to get back to you. So as you leave this webinar, there's just 3 simple questions. If you would like more information or you have any more information that you'd like to ask or comments are suggested, that's great if you'd fill that out for us.
Great, thanks for mentioning that, Shelley.
Yeah, thanks again for everybody for participating.
Sure. So that's the end of our webinar. So I just want to say thanks to everyone again, and we wish you a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.